The Blocktalk Podcast started because of my passion for the property management industry. I wanted to start a conversation and add some value within the industry with a diverse range of people and professionals who can add something extra. As we start out, my aim is that the podcast offers some useful insight into a variety of views, opinions, thoughts, and foresights from our guests, who include business leaders and industry experts. If you enjoy the podcast and want to find out any other information, head on over to brianwelsh.co.uk. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Blocktalk Podcast with me, Brian Welsh, and Jax Bruce. Jax, how are you?
I'm very well. Today the sun is splitting out of the sky.
It is, isn't it?
It's beautiful outside, so it does always brighten the mood. How are you doing?
I'm not too bad. I have the after effects of COVID, so I'm a bit knackered, to be fair, if the truth be known. And but apart from that, I had a very slight kind of engagement with COVID. I did not feel overly bad at all, so I think I was extremely lucky, to be fair. So, okay, so today we have the pleasure of chatting with Mike Heffron, the Chief Exec of Under One Roof Scotland. Mike has previously held a variety of posts in communications, including Policy and Public Affairs Officer of the National Union of Students. He spent some time in Australia, returning to Scotland in 2018, where he took up a role at Clan Childlaw Limited as Ops Manager. He joined Under One Roof in April 2021. Hi, Mike. How are you doing today?
Doing great. And it's sunny where I am too, so
Good.
Everyone's happy there.
Yeah, it doesn't happen a huge amount in Scotland, but yeah, it is. It has been a nice couple of days. Thanks very much for joining us today. So I'll just get straight into it. Under One Roof has obviously been around for a while, and you took over as CEO almost a year ago. You have a section on your website giving advice to flat owners when choosing a property factor, but it also shows that between a third and half of all flat owners self-factor. Do you have an insight into why this is the case? Is it just about that they don't want to pay a fee to factor, or is there more to it?
I think it's probably a combination of a few things. I think there's a perception around the cost. I don't know how much of that matches up with reality, but the perception of what value are we getting for the factoring that would take place if we were to work with an organization rather than self-factor. I think sometimes there's sort of a out of sight, out of mind situation where if there's nothing immediately that needs done, that they, therefore they just don't feel that they need it. If they're just having to organize, getting the stair lights fixed, and getting someone to clean the stair, once a week or once every few weeks, and that's it, then they don't feel that they need to. And I think sometimes probably there's also just a perception issue, where they may be in a situation where they had an unpleasant experience with a professional factor in a previous building or something like that, and they don't know it wasn't resolved in the way that they wanted it to, or they didn't realize that there was ways to resolve issues with factoring when they're working with a professional factoring company. So it's probably, I would say it is a mix probably of those few things. And some of them you can, and with podcasts and information like this, we can certainly sort of address as we go.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I think a lot of the people we've had on who are kind of principals and work in property factoring recognize these sort of things, and they certainly they talk a lot about education and educating people who live in properties that have common areas. So yeah, it's interesting. I guess it depends how much someone really wants to get involved in it. Because if it's cleaning and stair cleaning and kind of routine stuff, then that's fair enough. But when it comes to things bigger, I guess that's more difficult for just maybe a homeowner to deal with on their own.
Yeah, no, that's absolutely right. things are becoming more complicated. They're getting more complex, and so there is certainly a need for for all owner occupiers really, and landlords that own tenement properties, to be taking a look at what exactly it is that they need to be doing with the amount of properties in Scotland that are in disrepair. And that's one reason we exist as a charity under one roof, is to provide, we recognize that there is not the culture in this country that you would have other places of recognizing the need to upkeep your property. And that it's a collective responsibility, and there is no one that's going to swoop in and save the day. Much, the councils don't do that kind of work like they would have maybe done 20, 30 years ago. There aren't grants to come in and fix stuff. You're going to have to do it yourself. And organizing those fixes is where the factoring sort of element comes into as well. So I think there is, I think that certainly is a significant element into it. From our perspective, the important thing is that there is factoring being done, whether it's self-factoring or it's with a professional organization doing the factoring. But the issue is, it's the self-factoring. It can, it takes up a lot of time. And it can be a lot of work in those more sort of, if it's more than just getting the stair cleaned and the lights fixed. A lot of properties need a lot more sort of attention than that. And that's where it would certainly, it's worth seriously considering whether or not to bring in a property manager to be looking out after that kind of stuff, because, it's part of it is, you've got a little bit of safety is the right word, but you've got a peace of mind, I think is the word I'm looking for there, that there is somebody that's paying attention. And that's, I think, the most important thing with this is that somebody is paying attention, and we'll be looking into, we'll be regularly checking into the property, and we'll be, depending on the sort of what their requirements are for that property manager, is that looking at and pointing out where things need to be addressed. Otherwise, there's much more serious problems that come down the line.
Yeah, sure. That leads me on actually nicely, to be fair. The tenement steering group, how do you feel that's progressing? And how does the number of properties that are self-factored affect the progress of that?
And when we're talking about the tenement steering group, you're talking about the cross-party working group proposals, is that right? Yeah. So where that stands right now is that it's with the Scottish government. And just to talk a little bit about the background for those who aren't familiar, there were 3 proposals that the cross-party group came up with that were all agreed that the Scottish government took on. One of those was 5-year tenement inspections, mandatory 5-year tenement inspections. One was a mandatory owners association, so every tenement would have to have an owners association. And the third one is mandatory building funds. So people would have to, the proposal is that people would have to put money into a building fund and start contributing to that. So those are the broad overall proposals that were put in. Scottish government took it on and said, yes, we're going to we generally think this is a good idea. So where it stands now is with the Scottish Law Commission. Now the Scottish Law Commission has to look at this, particularly the element around mandatory owners associations. And the reason for that is that there's an interaction potentially around title deeds. And there might be some legislative conflicts with that. So they're taking a look at that to see whether or not it's possible under current legislation and the way that title deeds work, to see whether it's possible to do that. And if so, how would that actually look as far as a legislative proposal? And then I think what the Scottish government has done is they said, well, since we're going to be looking at that, we might as well look at the other 2 elements of it as well. So the Law Commission is going to take a look at all 3 proposals. Now, where that currently stands right now is that they are just beginning to start to interact with organizations such as ourselves. Like the plan is for April to start interacting with us to get information. This is the Law Commission to get information about what the current status of things are. And then I think the idea is, from what I've seen of a timeline, is that we're looking at a consultation going out, but not until the end of next summer, so summer 2023, I think, with the ultimate aim at this point of that legislation coming up to the Parliament, but probably not being put forward by the Scottish government, looking like the next Parliament. So we're looking, I think, 2026. So we're still a ways off, which is unfortunate from our perspectives. I think we would like to see that moving quicker for a number of reasons, particularly around the owners associations issue, because I mean, we ultimately think that having owners associations are so critical in addressing the needs, to getting the process started, to addressing the needs of and the disrepair that are going on in buildings across Scotland. And there's no reason why people can't do owners associations now. They certainly are, many of them are. But having everyone being required to be talking about their building will make a huge step, I think, forward, revolutionary almost, in the way that people will have to think about their own building, their own homes, and what they need to do to make sure that those buildings are upstanding. And it connects up into so many different other ways. If you talk about the Scottish government's proposals and sort of targets around energy efficiency and net zero. Again, a lot of that stuff, in order to do it, you're going to need neighbors talking to each other. You're going to need to be, people in stairs are going to need to be having conversations and knowing what they need to do to agree to bring those proposals forward within their own buildings if they want to do retrofit work in order to match the energy efficiency targets, very ambitious targets, and excellent targets, but ambitious targets that the Scottish government's putting forward. Yeah. So we certainly would like to see that moving quicker. Whether or not that can happen is hard to say right now. I think part of it is probably just the Law Commission is not just dealing with this proposal. They're dealing with, of course, all sorts of legislative proposals the Scottish government's putting forward. So it just simply may be a matter of they just don't have the ability to speed up the time frame. But it'll be interesting to see, particularly in this current Parliament, and the emphasis that is being put on energy efficiency, net zero, carbon reduction in buildings, and the effect that those targets are going to have in the medium future, I should say, whether or not, what can be done to encourage people, even if we don't get the legislation through in the meantime. And the second point of that is connected up with that is what that means for factoring and property management. And I think ultimately, and this gets down to sort of a core element of what we're talking about, is that, ultimately having owners associations benefits property managers and vice versa from the other perspective as well. The property managers will find benefit in having owners associations, having a central contact, having someone that an organization set up that they can talk to, that they've got a contact person, a regular contact person that they can go and speak to, and that person knows what is required of them in order to approve repairs that need to be done and all the rules that are around that, whether you need a majority, whether you need everyone to agree. And at the same time, those owners association will have, I think, a much better understanding of what property managers, what factors need in order to bring works forward, and what are the reasons why they may not be able to do so unless decisions are made in that stair to go forward with that. And I think that will help dramatically as far as sort of some of the communication issues that happen and breakdowns of communications that happen between owners and property factors.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, because finding a residents association in a stairway in a tenement is pretty much non-existent at the moment, I would say. But certainly the larger developments, newer ones possibly, but just larger ones, all tend to have a residents association of some description that has an interaction with the property factor.
And you don't need, and the thing is that we have resources on our website that around forming an owners association, and having like a model constitution and those kinds of issues. And if you're in this sector, working at the level that we are, like, you'll be familiar with the sort of the importance of having governance documents and all that kind of stuff. But most people in their daily lives don't ever have to deal with having a sort of a formalized governance document of like a constitution for their owners association. And, as much as I encourage people to do so, and there are very good reasons why, and we've got, like I said, we've got a template on, it's a small, not a very large document, but sets out so the basic sort of understandings and rules of who's going to be sort of, taking note of decisions that are making and how that information is circulated. Simply just having using WhatsApp, using all the sort of different ways of that you can use even with modern technology to be communicating with each other, is in a form of owner associations. It's better than nothing. It's much like self-factoring. It's better than nothing. Is that you've got people talking, and that's the most important thing. If you've got people talking in the building that are sharing information and making sure that everybody knows what's going on in the building, most people won't engage. But if you've got 2 or 3 people that are willing to sort of just be keeping a little closer eye on things, it makes a huge difference in potentially avoiding problems that come down the line.
Yeah, no, totally agree. Okay, so we've had many conversations with industry leaders in property factoring and property management, and one common theme that keeps arising is the perception of property factoring, which appears to be not so good in some cases, and there is a job to be done there. With your knowledge, what advice would you give to the industry to improve perceptions and to help reduce the number of self-factored properties?
Well, I think we get a lot of inquiries at Under One Roof, and if any of your listeners do have inquiries, we're more than welcome to get in touch with us at info@underoneroof.scot, and you can find that email on the website. But if you've got a question about whether you're a property factor and you've got a question about what the rules are, or issues related to tenement management, and we get a lot of people, owner occupiers and landlords, that'll get in touch that have questions about their relationship with their factor, that we try to give. And what we do is we provide independent information on those topics to both sides. We're not taking the side of one or the other. We're trying to basically say, look, this is what the rules say. This is what the legislation says. This is where to find out information. So there's all the formal stuff that goes on, but also providing a little bit more of experience from, the conversations, based on the conversations that we've had with owner occupier or owners and with landlords and property factors about where communication, where things have broken down. And it largely comes down to communication. In a lot of cases, it'll be owner occupiers or landlords saying, I've contacted the factor and they say that, and they've not gotten back in touch, or they've given me, they've said stuff like we're not going to comment on that, and that kind of stuff. So communication, I think, is a huge element of the situation. Is that when things go wrong, people are angry and they're looking for somebody to blame, and they're also worried because they're worried that they're going to have to put a huge amount of money toward a repair that they may not have, and oftentimes have not put money aside to address. So I think that one of the critical elements of it is to addressing that is literally is doing everything you can to be having that communication line open and figuring out new ways just to be checking in. And I know that, the people that are working for property managers, like, they've got large portfolios, I'm sure, and they're taking care of many properties. And there'll be some properties that have that require more attention than others due to the people that are involved. But I think it's really important to look for those opportunities to reach out and communicate and say, hey, how are things going? Whether it's, checking in, having regular sort of meetings, but also just checking in from time to time, especially if you've got owners association. So one thing is encouraging the people in those buildings to form an owners association. So you have that sort of regular contact with somebody, but having that ability to be communicating with people and saying and letting them know, things like, if they're saying, well, why aren't you doing this, is pointing out, look, here's the written statement. This is where you can find it exactly what is agreed to. And sometimes it'll be people that have moved into the building and therefore they're not even familiar that such a document even exists. And so they just assume that the factor is responsible for going ahead and doing the repair, because they don't know that the factors has to have the owners agree. If it's a repair, they need more than 50% of people to agree. They need to have assurance that they're going to get paid for organizing these repairs and stuff like that. If they're the ones that are working with the contractor, making sure that they're getting their funding back. So I think a lot of it is having that regular communication that's going on and letting people know as much as possible what it is that you are set up to do in that particular property and what the things that aren't. And also pointing them in the direction, though, and not just leaving it at that, but pointing them in the direction of ourselves and other people when it comes to things like, what do you do if you've got missing shares? You've got somebody that won't pay or can't pay. What are the options? What if you got an empty home? What are, each council, local authorities, some of them have empty homes officers, some of them don't. What can you do if you've got an empty home and therefore you don't have the full shares made up? All those kinds of things that will make owners feel that the factor is looking out for their best interests. Because I think there's certainly, I've heard a strain of thought that, they're just looking to extract as much money as possible from us to do the minimum amount of work. And there are a lot of, majority of factors out there are doing, the best they can under the circumstances, but are doing a good job of making sure that those buildings that living up to their commitments to the people that have contracts with them, and making people understand, not making people understand, but letting people understand why it is that, for example, due to the title deeds, the property manager is written into the title deeds. So it might, there are certain requirements if you want to change and move on to a different management company if you're not happy with the services provided, but having those communication channels open and looking for opportunities to reach out to people in those buildings, or even having one contact that can just check in and say, hey, is there anything that people have got to do with, rather than waiting for the yearly AGM or the yearly meeting where everybody's going to come to the meeting and just, hammer the property manager with all the complaints they've had about the guys that come and they're not doing the bushes right or whatever those kind of things are, is that you're sort of nipping it in the bud, which is a good metaphor for what people should be doing around their own homes, to be honest with you, is looking for opportunities to fix problems fix potential problems before they occur.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, all you're doing is keeping the value of your property up. You know what I mean? It's probably one of the biggest assets anyone will ever buy in their entire life, and and not maintaining it doesn't hold the value for you when you decide to sell. I have to say there was a lot going through my mind when you were talking there. So two things. We CPL, which I'm MD of and supply software to the property factoring industry, and we were having this conversation actually before we started recording, and I think there are around 650,000 factored properties in Scotland, and CPL on our product we run about 350,000 of them now, mainly in the kind of private sector. So I've been in this industry for probably about 20 odd years, provision of software to this market. And I have to say, I've never met, and I talk to our clients a huge amount. I do like the sound of my own voice. I like to chat to our clients, and never ever has one of them even remotely come across as someone who just wants to kind of get money out of somebody. They talk a huge, and they're passionate about kind of helping their clients and making sure they maintain those properties properly. But they're restricted in so many ways. Title deeds, people who don't want to pay, and all of these sort of things. Nothing in life is free. If you're not going to pay for something, you're not going to get the service. So, I sometimes find it difficult to kind of hear when people sort of are quite untrusting of these sort of people, because it's certainly not something that I certainly see with huge amount of my clients. And actually something else you said there, and it was something that Annie Flint said on her podcast as well, and it was all about the kind of communication. And it got me thinking, actually, after Annie's podcast, which was only a few weeks ago. And it was something that we already had on our roadmap. And Annie said, someone phones up a factor and they ask them to go and check something, and then they don't hear anything for 2 weeks, and they think the factor's not done anything. And the factor's away, talking to the other people in the building, they're talking to contractors, they're trying to get prices and all of these sort of things. But just because as clients not had a phone call back, they think the factor's actually doing nothing. And it certainly got me thinking, and has fast-tracked something that we've had in our roadmap for some time, and that is kind of a case tracking module within our product, where a client who puts in who creates the case or creates the question or whatever to get it, let's just say it's an estimate to get, I don't know, the front of the building painted, a case will be created, and there'll be multiple kind of workflow steps through that case, and at any point where the workflow stage changes, a text or an email will get pinged to the client to say, this is where we are now. But also, most of our clients, not all of them, but most of our clients have a client portal where our client's client, so the homeowner, can log in and look at their account. But also to make that information available on the client portal as well, so that people can go and self-serve and actually see how, where the case is at any point in time. And I think, at the end of the day, me personally, I'm all about customer service, and probably because I've seen some really shocking stuff in my time, and I would hope that we provide a good service, but also to help our clients provide a good service as well. And I think that these sort of things, people do have large portfolios, and they are profitable commercial organizations, and they need to interact with their clients in the most efficient and lean manner that they can. So to give them the tools to do that would hopefully help with all of that sort of stuff we're talking about.
No, I agree, and I think that's I get the impression from speaking with owner occupiers and such, when they get frustrated is that, they think about their property manager as dealing just with them. And there's no reason why they should, if they've got a problem, they want the problem fixed. They're not going to be cared about the fact that that property manager has a number of other properties that they have to deal with. And they've got it's not simply a matter of just going away and fixing the problem. So I think some of it is actually, and what you're talking about is an excellent way of doing is, potentially as far as sort of keeping people up to speed, and they can track to see where things are. And it's also just managing expectations, and in that conversation, just being upfront. It's like, look, it's going to probably take a few weeks. This is the reason why it's going to take a few weeks to get a hold of people. And it's difficult, as you know, to get a hold of some people. And we've got, and I've got other properties, but don't worry, I will get back with you. Because I think if they can make it feel that it's not just a faceless person on the phone, it's not like they're contacting, if they've got a concern, it's not like they're calling a customer service agent and like they're just another sort of faceless person, but there's actually somebody that is, you've got an actual contact of someone that feels that they're actually looking after you, but explains the sort of barriers and sort of things that they're going to need to get through. I think that will make a huge difference actually in helping people understand sort of, what the time frames are to doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, totally. Okay, I've got a feeling that my next question might be similar to the ones that you've just answered, to be fair, but let's see. On his podcast, David Reed, who's a past president, in fact, immediate past president of the PMAS and also the CEO of James Gibb, he talked about how the industry needed to educate downsizers and first-time buyers about property factoring, because these are the kind of people who have never come across a property factor at all and knows what it is probably. Do you agree with that? And also, what would your best advice to the industry be to kind of educate and inform them?
Well, I mean, I think that we touched on a little bit, but I think the quick sort of way to do that would be from the industry perspective is I would recommend is point them over to us. One of the reasons why Under One Roof has support of widely across the sector, whether it be property managers, whether it be local authorities, whether it be Scottish government, whether it be other aspects of the housing sector, is that we provide independent and sort of thorough information. I mean, the Annie, who you had on in your podcast a few weeks ago, and John Gilbert, who wrote the Guide to Tenement Maintenance, which has formed the backbone of our website, are there's nobody in Scotland that knows more about the issues of tenement maintenance and tenement management than those two people. And I'm hopefully going to get to their level at some point. I still got a ways to go, I think, and a lot to learn. But they have written extensively on all sorts of issues. And one aspect of it that has been written up and is on our website is we have an extensive section on property factoring. So I would really recommend going and checking out our website. We've got multiple articles that deal with just a general overview of what is a property manager, what is their role, issues around how to find a factor, what are floats and advanced deposits, the registry, the code of conduct, how to deal with problems, how to, all those kinds of issues are covered, and they're covered extensively. And they come from an organization that is independent. And so it's not trying to push one side or the other. It's trying to get people together to work out these problems, which are ultimately going to eventually address the issue that we have around sort of tenement maintenance and the disrepair of our properties and keeping our properties up, and that has an effect also even on the fact that if we can keep our properties in good standing and we're not having to replace them, that also has an effect on things like carbon, our carbon footprint, and carbon reduction, all those kinds of issues of not having to build new buildings but actually using the existing stock that we have, some of it quite beautiful. And part of a heritage of Scotland is to keeping those up. So I would recommend is to come to take a look at our website, to do a little self-promotion here, but come to our website. That's why we exist, is to provide that information to people, both property factors and people like Dave was talking about, that are interacting with factors for the first time, because we set it out in very sort of plain language. And we also have the opportunity, if you still got a question after you've looked at us, is to get in touch with us, and we're more than happy to give you to answer any specific questions on that as well.
Cool. Okay, that's great. And you touched on the code of conduct actually in the answer there. Do you think the Property Factors Act has helped relationships, and do you think the Act could be further improved? And if so, how?
I probably best address the first question. I mean, I think it has definitely helped, because it is standardized a process that would have been very, very varied, or in some case non-existent prior to it. Is it gives people a very clear set of what is expected from both sides. But from the owner-occupier perspective, or in the landlord perspective, what is expected, and what from property owners, property factors, and having that sort of clarity and understanding of it makes it a lot easier for people to navigate. So I think ultimately that's been a really positive sort of thing, as far as sort of what that code of conduct and what the legislature brought that forward has meant to from the perspective of owners. I think it's been really helpful from that perspective to know what exists. And you can, when people get in touch with us and they say they've got concerns and stuff like that, we will point them to that every single time. Say before you're talking about bringing it to any other level, particularly around legal issues. And we very much encourage people to stay out. The first tier tribunal exists, and it's definitely an option if things have broken down badly, but is to make sure though that owners know that to go through that code of conduct, that every property manager has to abide by, and making sure that might be the best way to resolve the problem that they have. So having that there, I think has been very positive, I think, for owners.
Okay, and do you think there's further improvement? Do you think there's further improvement to the Act?
To be honest with you, I've not yet seen that there's been. I mean, there's always improvements that can be made, right? There's always ways that it could be tweaked and do so. The question of whether or not you're going to be probably though revisiting the act, it's probably almost at this point, it's going to be one that has to settle in for a bit longer, and there's probably going to be another sort of concern that if people feel that it's not actually doing its job, whether or not it be revisited again. But given the priorities of the Scottish government around housing, it's one of those things where there might be some tweaks, but in reality, probably it's not something that's going to be touched by this government currently in the next few years or something like that. So it's at this point, it's probably just a matter of just working out what is actually working within the code of conduct, and when it's not working, when that's broken down, is using the first tier tribunal to reach a solution. And the first tier tribunal has been adapting as well. When it gets to that sort of situation where people are going through that, that's taking more place online. And certainly we had a webinar just a couple months ago that dealt with the first tier tribunal. We had somebody from Property Managers Association, Allison. We had somebody from the first tier, one of the people that sit on the first tier tribunal, to talk through the different issues that come up and how to use it. And it can be used obviously from both sides, but from the main thing I think that came out of it in the talking to the person that sits on that first tier tribunal panel is trying to get to see if those two sides can sit down in a virtual room or a real room, depending on what the situation is, and try to work it out and get communicating. And again, it just goes back to the whole communication issues to try to see if you can work out a solution to this. Has it been one of those situations where there's just been a communications breakdown of an understanding of things, and seeing if you can work that out without having to go through any of those sort of processes too, because you ultimately want to be able to be working with each other in the long term. And it's the same thing we say with other owners. I mean, when there's a breakdown in sort of within the stair around a question around money or any other things that come up around maintenance and stuff like that, is to try to work that stuff out, to go through mediation, do what you need to do to try to work that stuff out before you get to a legal process, because the legal process is set up for sort of resolving things that can't be resolved. But ultimately, again, you're going to be living next to this person for a long period of time. You want to have ultimately a decent relationship with this person. And yes, you may win your particular case, but also ultimately sort of, you're causing yourself much more difficulty down the line, and a lot more sort of things, sort of upset between the two of you when you have to live together as neighbors. So I think the same thing applies with property managers and owners as well.
Yeah. No, definitely. Okay, last question from me before we get on to Jack's three quirky questions. And actually, you've touched on this already, and I don't know if you have anything else to talk about it, but sustainable homes is another really hot topic at the moment, and there are some initiatives happening within the industry, but it seems that self-factoring could hamper progress here. Do you agree with that? And do you think the industry could influence self-factored properties to be factored by going down this route?
I wouldn't say that it's necessarily hampering progress in this perspective. I think one reason I would say so is because I think it's fairly early in the sustainable homes, in the energy efficiency, net zero, all that stuff it's very early days. It's going to be moving fairly rapidly in the next couple of years, given the targets the Scottish government has laid out on sort of energy efficiency in properties. And there certainly is a strong case to be made from professional property managers that they can help buildings sort of navigate their way through those things. So, I mean, my advice would be, from the property management side of things, is to make sure that your organization is up to speed on all the different opportunities and issues that retrofit currently present to owners, what the options are as far as sort of changing, even moving away from gas boilers to, doing stuff around sort of insulation, and the difficulties and barriers to doing those things as well. I mean, it's not just enough to say we're just going to put insulation up on a building and that'll solve the problem. I mean, if you're in an old pre-1919 sandstone tenement, you're not going to be putting up exterior insulation on these beautiful buildings. Interior insulation is massively disruptive to the people that live in those places. And with those stone buildings too, there's also, you can do retrofit wrong, and you can make things worse by drying out buildings and such like that, and making sure there's not enough sort of breathability within the buildings too. So I think I wouldn't go as far as to say that self-factoring is harming it. I think that though there is a lot that if property management companies want to be able to be attracting more people to their organization, is provide, have the information and the resource at your fingertips. Because right now people, owners are looking for, and I've been involved with a lot of these, and just this past weekend was involved with a organization called Local Homes on the south side of Glasgow that was taking a look at trying to match up owners with retrofit coordinators and stuff like that. What's the best way that they can do it? What's available for grant funding? All those things, providing, if property managers are up to speed on that, really up to speed on that, and can provide themselves as a resource to say, look, this is what's available. This is where you can find out for more information. That would be a huge incentive and a huge potentially marketing tool for yourselves to increase the participation of people in professional factoring and recruiting people to it, is to provide yourself as a resource for that, or at least an information signposting place where you can say, look, this is where you can find out much more information on this kind of stuff, and this is the kind of stuff that's available, and these are the kind of disruptions that it would cause, and the savings that the cost that it's going to take to you. All those things, I think, would be incredibly beneficial as far as sort of getting people to see the value of professional factoring.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Okay, thanks for that. That's my questions over. Jax, do you want to fire in with your normal 3 questions?
Yes. Hi, Mike. That was really interesting. We asked all our guests the quirky questions, a little bit of lighter note. So what's your biggest failure across your entire career, and what did you learn from it?
The biggest failure across my entire career, I would have to say, my experience working out in Australia, it was my first role in managing people. And I learned quite a bit about having been an employee for many years and worked under bosses. It was a much different experience this was my first experience of being the boss. And probably, and it was difficult at times. It was difficult at times as far as managing people.
Yeah.
And I think what did I learn from that was not doing too much yourself, delegating stuff. And I knew that is a concept, but actually just letting people get on with their work and letting them make mistakes and not providing. You didn't need to be sort of hovering over them and making sure that they were getting everything done. So I think that was one thing that I picked up, and I think in the current role and the role that came right after that one too, successfully have been able to do that. So that was a learning point for me, was sort of letting people just do the work that they're good at, and providing them help when they need a little bit of assistance. But a little bit of negative criticism can go a long way when you're an employee speaking to the boss. And I think I had forgotten that lesson, and I learned it the hard way, and have put it back into practice in the last 2 jobs, including my current one too, to fantastic, I think, success, as I have had such a really good relationship with the people I've been working under me in the last 2 jobs.
Brilliant. Cool. And if you ruled the world for a day, what would you do?
Oh, I would ban Mr. Brightside by the Killers. Everybody loves that song, and it drives me mad. I absolutely, and it's a good pop song, don't get me wrong, and everyone loves it, and you'll probably get all sorts of hate mail with me. So send them to info@underoneroof.com.
Okay, Mike, it's been nice talking to you. I'm going to cut this down.
Hey, that's what I'm talking about.
I love that song.
Everybody loves it. There's a funny story in the BBC yesterday about someone that had created, I can't remember who it was. I think it was somewhere in it was in the UK. I think it might have been in England, but they had created a massive monument to someone that had died, and they had done it without the cemetery's approval. And it's like this massive stone sort of monument to this person that had passed away, including a solar powered jukebox. And I was laughing about this with one of my friends and saying that I wanted them to do that for me. And they said, yeah, that's fine, but we'll make sure that the solar jukebox plays Mr. Brightside on endless repeat, which I then promised to haunt him for the rest of eternity for doing such a terrible thing. So that would be my one thing.
Oh, cool. That's a good one. So when you're 70 and look back at your life and you've eradicated Mr. Brightside out of the world, what will you be glad you did or feel proud of, something you've done or you still want to do?
Stepping away from work stuff and any of the stuff I do that. It would be I have twin 8-year-olds, and just being a parent to them and guiding them through their life and watching them and grow and looking onto what they've achieved. I'm sure that I will be so proud of whatever they've done. And so I think for me, it will be probably an answer everybody would probably give, but it would be, I think, be proud of the children that I have raised. So they still have a lot of time. They're only 8, so they have plenty of opportunities. But I'm sure no matter what, I'll be proud of. I'll be.
How do you find bringing up twins? The reason I ask that is I am a twin, and I still get on very, very well with my twin brother. But how is it?
It's probably like all sorts of parenting. It's just a little bit different. It was very much of a struggle in the early days, of course, having to manage 2 really small children. Now that they're 8 and they're started really sort of developing into their own little personalities, it's wonderful to see. I think that the biggest struggle sometimes is making sure that there's a constant need for fighting for attention, and so trying to, I think, balance out and making sure that everybody is getting the right amount of attention and support for the things they need, and recognizing also that the constant complaint of that's not fair because I didn't do the exact specific thing for them, that the exact specific proportion of a brownie that went from one to the other, and just recognizing that there's a need to that's okay, and eventually they can make brownies for me. So,
do they look alike?
No, a boy and a girl. So,
oh, right, okay.
Boy and a girl. Yeah.
It's funny actually, because I was just thinking about this the other day. It's a twin brother I have, and whilst we are medically not identical twins, we are very, very similar. And I'm in my early 50s now, and people I meet don't, when I tell them, like, after I've known them for 2 years that I have a twin brother, like, what? There's 2 of you? And the weirdest thing about being a twin has actually happened in COVID times, and the reason is when I'm on a Zoom call, I keep thinking my bloody brother's there, because I'm looking at the screen and all I can see is them and not me, and I go, no, surely I don't look that old. I'm so older than that. So, yeah, it's the most bizarre thing. I think, actually, to be fair, being a twin, I don't know, it's a very weird kind of, not something I can explain, but there's just something very, very weird but quite wonderful about having a twin, to be fair. It's just bizarre.
Well,
anyway.
It's funny because that I have 2 brothers and a sister, all younger than me, and we had twins, and then my sister had twins.
Oh wow!
And then my brother, who was like, they were looking to have one more child, and that was they had 2 already, and then they also had twins as well. Wow. So our family, like my parents, like went from having like 3 grandchildren to having like 12 grandchildren in the space of about 4 years. So we're just like, we've got twins all over the place now in our family. So that's always entertaining as well.
Cool. Thank you so much, Mike.
Mike, that's been really, really useful. Thanks very much. And enjoy the journey with Under One Roof. It's a fabulous organisation. And do you want to just let everyone know where they can get in touch with you if they need to? Are you on LinkedIn and email?
Yes. So you can find us any sorts of places. I really encourage. We of course have the website which has all the information, but and that's underoneroof.scot. But we also have launched in the last year Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all of which can be found easily enough through Google search, LinkedIn as well. And all of those provide an opportunity where we publish not just things that are going on or events we might be happening, webinars that we've got, informational opportunities for people to interact, but also just general sort of tips that come out about what you can be doing in your own properties, or what are the situations in particular with with property factors, as well as how to sort of deal with certain kinds of issues that'll just pop up in your newsfeed. So I really encourage people to give us a like, give us a follow, and share that on too, because ultimately one of our primary purpose is to provide information and support for all people that either own a property or interact with those who own properties. And through the information we provide, we can really, I think, collectively help people and keep the housing stock in Scotland up to improve the standard and keep what's there at a high standard. And thanks very much for having me on today. It was an absolute pleasure to chatting with you both, and would recommend if you ever have any issues or specific stuff, to please get in touch with us and drop us an email, and we're more than happy to get back with some information that will help you out.
Okay, thanks very much. Thanks again, Mike.